Hey, Cece and Jonathan. Remember when we started that church back in 2019 and we thought that things were bad?
Those were the good old days.
Yes, they were. Oh my goodness, I can't even get my mind around it now because it felt like such a challenging time. It was so apocalyptic and it was so like, but we at least we've got each other. Surely there's nowhere to go from here but up. I mean,
Right, right.
unbelievable,
It
unbelievable.
was terrible. We thought it was the end, maybe the end. And
Absolutely.
we were just huddling together, trying to stay strong in the state of Oklahoma, which is a hard place to try to stay strong for a lot of
Yes.
us.
It
But
is.
we hadn't seen nothing yet. And it is 2026.
Yes.
And not just us, not just the United States. The world is a mess, but it's mainly a mess because of the United States. And we
Absolutely.
need to huddle again. So Jonathan, we're so glad that you're here. Let us huddle.
Yes.
Listen, y'all are the most sanity restoring presences in my life, and what it does bring back to me from when we were meeting every week and all that is that same feeling of sanity restored, soul clarity, just to be able to see your faces and know that you're out there and we're still in this fight together. So yeah, this is
Yep.
amazing for me, just brilliant.
Yep.
Well, I have to say that it's such an intense time, so much worse than we could have possibly imagined, that your book, How to Survive a Shipwreck, which really got me, I will say this always, midwifed me through a bit of
Mhm.
my kind of my deconstruction from, evangelicalism, but also in the fact that my community, my house of worship, my spiritual kindred family turned out to support a white supremacist, let's just say that. It really
Yeah.
midwifed me through that time of kind of getting like, how do I survive the loss of thousands of what feel like family members into a time where people would elect a man, just this first time, elect somebody to office who would treat and speak marginalized people and women so terribly. That was nothing. So
Yeah.
anyway, I think it's really a good time to revisit kind of, your book and what that was about and how significant it still is right now. So talk to us, Jonathan, about surviving this shipwreck.
How do we
Well,
survive this shipwreck?
well, for one, it's even in writing it, it was funny because I could feel myself trying to write myself to shore in that season of my life. And the way I'm quite certain I was thinking about Shipwreck then is that this is a season to get through and that you get over. And death and resurrection is a thing that happens, not
Mhm.
yet being fully aware of the fact that death and resurrection is a thing that's always happening and that just recurs over and over again, which in a way, even coming into spring, makes all the sense in the world. But we still, of course, want to believe that whatever season of grief or loss or trauma or pain that we're going through, that we get to the shore and that's all. But at this point, I tell people all the time. I mean, not that everybody's just going around asking me why. Give me the reason for this hope that you have. But if someone asks me like why I'm a person of faith at all, that's really what it comes down to. Is that I see death and resurrection everywhere.
Mm,
I see death and resurrection in everything.
mm.
And some of what I feel like is happening in the world right now, if this makes any kind of sense, is I think there's some things that we thought were dead that just we're not dead yet and
Yeah.
takes a long time to die. Empires
Right.
can take a long time to
A
die.
long
And
time.
so I think like I wonder if in some ways if we weren't collectively trying to fast forward ourselves into that rebirth,
Mhm.
not not realizing, to quote Monty Python, like, "Oh, I'm not dead yet." It's not quite,
That's
it's
true.
not so
That's so good.
So
Yeah.
good. Jonathan, what have you been up to? Since our time together in Oklahoma, so much has shifted and changed for all of us. And
Yeah.
so, like, tell us. I've been where you are, but I want everybody else to hear. Like, what you been up to?
well, I'm up to a lot of things. It's a lot of categories in my ADHD brain between Indiana and Oklahoma. So I'm the director of the Center for Spiritual Life at DePauw University. And part of what's beautiful about that is getting to do the interfaith, multi-faith work that I do
Mm.
there, and working closely with our imam and rabbi and that community. But I also am pastoring a small little country Methodist church, Fillmore United Methodist Church, while kind of having, again, a foot in both worlds in terms of family, still largely be in Oklahoma. So I'm up to a lot of things in that way, but it's really been good for my own soul, I think, to sort of be tethered between the concrete practices of this little tender community of mostly older folks on the one hand, pastorally, doing the spiritual formation stuff that I've always done, but then also to be in another world that's really exciting for me, where I'm getting to explore all these intersections between traditions and spiritual disciplines. So yeah, that's in short what I've been up to.
Yeah, well, that's huge. I wanna hear more about, like, your work on campus.
Mhm.
I wanna hear more about, because 'cause you're Church of God, that's your background,
Yeah.
and so, and I am something, I don't know, I grew up Methodist, and I have been in a lot of different, settings, but in all of those settings that we've been in, we would have been like double back to even think
Absolutely.
about doing interfaith work together. So I want to hear, like, what do you do? What's your role with the students on campus? What's that like for you? I want to hear what your role is, like how you work in interfaith out there. Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question, Cece. And it was such a joy, by the way, to get to have you on campus for our Mendenhall lecture. You
It
did
was
just
fun.
extraordinary job. And um, but yeah, the community, it's really is really beautiful. And my life is interesting because on the one hand, I feel like, I have stumbled, kind of come full circle into Methodism, I think, in my own strange way, hillbilly Pentecostal who also is living at all these intersections. But so I think what I do on the one hand is as Jesus-y, as Jesus-centric as it's ever been, but then at the same time, um, having these wonderful relationships. I mean, I think I talk about our imam, Ahmed Alamin, a lot because he's really become one of my closest friends. And it's so interesting because, like, so he, as a Muslim who was initially trained in Jordan, is such a mystic. And I realized one of the first times that I heard him talk that even the sound, I mean, the literal sound of his voice
Hmm.
has kind of the cadence of Pentecostal testimony.
Hmm.
And then the more like we get to talking about things, and it's like I realize, the kind of pushback he gets within his own world is like, why aren't you talking about hell and judgment? Why is everything about love? Why are you welcoming everybody? And he's absolutely somebody who believes that God works through prayer and intervenes in like supernatural ways. So one of the interesting discoveries of this season in my life is that, like, at this point I have way, way more in common with my dear friend the imam than most Christian pastors that I know, even though a lot of us might recite the same creed or sing the same songs. And yet I'm kind of like, I don't actually recognize the sound in anything that you're doing at all. But when I'm with Imam Alameen, I hear that sound that I identify as the sound of God. So I think, those kinds of things for me personally have just been, it's been the best season vocationally of my life, with all the insane things going on in the world, because I get to live at these intersections, which for me are a microcosm of what God is doing, God wants to do, Spirit wants to do in the world. But yeah, but for me, it continues to blow my mind. It feels like a miracle, honestly, just to get to bear witness to some of the things that I get to hear and see there.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time when atheists are having to explain to Christians what Jesus said and what
Yes,
Jesus
yes.
did. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And I love that you're finding this kindredship with, your friend the Iman. And I believe you also are very close to a rabbi on campus because you're doing some really interesting work. And I've kind of gone to this place where, like, I really feel like I'm of the earth, but yet I also have
Yeah.
this kindred to people who are doing the work of justice and are Jesus centric, but I just can't handle that concept of religion. But I love that you're bringing in people of such different traditions in a time when there's so much genocide and war and atrocities and basically the fall of international law in a sense.
Yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit about, this kind of ecumenical, bringing two people together who might, seem to be enemies, but like bringing these people together in a place of love and friendship and in such a time of contradiction.
Well, I mean, I love how you even phrased that question, Malika. I think some of what I would say to that, I, I I don't feel like I've necessarily brought people together, which is part of what's been cool about it. Is it sometimes I feel like I get to have a ringside seat to these really holy things that I'm not orchestrating. I mean, so I'll put it this way: a couple years ago, so it was in the wake of the October 7th attacks and then multiple weeks of bombing in Gaza. And so, like, on our little campus of 2,000 students, both our Muslim and Jewish community, everybody's affected in rural Indiana by what's happening in this other part of the world. And one of the most instructive things that's ever happened. Like, so they decided they wanted to have a meeting, which I was part of, but I didn't really. I mean, I didn't pull it together. So we're sitting down, and the desire that they had initially was to draft some kind of a statement. We want to come up with some sort of communal statement that we could release that expressed some sort of solidarity with each other, care, like something like that. And but you see, our rabbi and imam have such a beautiful friendship, and I feel like a lot kind of happens as a natural extension of that anyway. So, it was the first Friday after everything that happened, and I'm sitting in Juma prayer. Imam Alamid is teaching. Rabbi Pfeffer is in the room with me as well, and we're both just kind of listening. And his whole charge in his sermon, as we would say, was to Muslim students who are really hurting and grieving and really feeling like this is weeks now of everything happening in Gaza, saying like, look, your Jewish friends on campus are your siblings, and both of these communities are marginalized in places like rural Indiana. You need to check in on each other. And like, it was later that day, a little bit before Shabbat, Muslim students are coming over and literally coming in the door and asking the questions like, hey, I just want to check, how are you? Are you okay? How are you feeling? And it was like, and to see that kind of mutual care there, the thing that was really brilliant to me is that what they decided, this was entirely student led and generated, was that they felt like, now how Christian does this sound in the way that we understand following Jesus? Well, we think that a shared meal actually would be far more powerful and important of a statement than any words that we could come up with. And so out of that experience, we just had our third annual Muslim Jewish community dinner, where the whole idea is like, there is a bigger statement to be made by sitting at a table eyeball to eyeball than anything that we could draft. So instead of trying to come up with like perfect language where all that gets so fraught, something about that, the centrality of the table, that I feel like it just keeps following me around, but coming back in different forms.
It does.
The table, guys.
Right. That's what the table, which was the name of the church that we were all a part of starting. That's what the name was. And Jonathan was leading that, and really the centrality of the table, that everybody is welcome, that nobody is excluded, that we don't own the table, right? Was really, really core to the work we were doing at that church. And Jonathan was leading us in that work. That's fascinating, Jonathan, because, there's been so much, there's been so much grief, and even those of us who don't have direct connection to the Jewish community or the Muslim community, there's just been, but people who care about folks' lives,
Yes.
There's been so much grief that we have not known what to do with. And I know even today there's so much grief, there are lots of people who like us feel like, this is like the worst time in human history that we can tell from our generation, right? And there are even people who were once supportive of this administration who are rethinking and leaving their support and leaving the MAGA movement and all of that. And I wanted and maybe we should have started out this way, but I think this is a good point too. There's so many people who are thinking through their faith right now, thinking through their backgrounds, thinking through how they were raised, thinking through their evangelicalism, thinking through all of that because of the political moment we're in and what we're seeing. Would you tell folk what your journey personally has been like a little bit in terms of faith deconstruction and reconstruction? I touched on the fact that you're a good old Church of God boy, but I want you to take us back to Church of God and tell us a little bit about that denomination and how you found your way to being able to really appreciate Jewish voices, to really being able to appreciate Muslim voices.
Oh, that's a beautiful question, Cece. That makes me happy to think about. By the way, and this is connected when you reflecting so in such a tender way on the table, where I very much felt led by y'all, not the other way around. But I think even that season that we were on, that journey that we got to take together, for me, it all started with growing up in these Pentecostal churches that were very rural. I always say, as a hillbilly Pentecostal, the main thing I felt like I learned how to do was listen to the Holy Spirit. And what I've told many people in my life who've been influential, who I know think now, I am past the deep end, like that I am unrecognizable and have all kinds of concerns about my eternal soul. It's like, y'all are the ones who taught me how to listen to the Holy Spirit.
Right.
The Holy Spirit is on the move. The God of the Exodus is always on the move. And so I feel like what happened for me is that I learned how to listen to that still small voice. Sometimes that has meant having to go places where my elders would not feel like that they would be able to go. But still following that spirit, following that sound. So in that way, I feel like even though culturally I look a lot less Pentecostal, I feel like I'm more Pentecostal than I've ever been, because that fundamental orientation around the Spirit and following the Spirit is the dynamic that continues to most shape my life. To be listening to a God that's dynamically speaking in the world in real time, like that's everything for me. So, the very short version of it is I very much see all of this as a Spirit-led journey where even though the spaces I'm in look very different from the spaces that I come from, again, that voice is familiar, the sound is familiar, the tenderness of the God that I've always known, like that is very much the same.
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
I know Cece wants to talk about eschatology, and I also want to kind of hit on the apocalypse, because that was one of the things when we were at the table, but you had the table beforehand. So I know it was when Nicole, Cece, and I kind of wooed you into what we had just copied from you. Like, we're gonna.
And you prophesied me in.
Wait a minute, let's be clear. It was Nicole who was doing the wooing, okay? Why?
Now that is true. That is true.
In Oklahoma. The only reason he partnered up with us to do the table. Okay, now okay, go ahead.
Just so everybody knows that Nicole and Jonathan did get married.
Yes, they did.
She did woo me like a siren back to Oklahoma. Back to this. I won't say using the phrases, but yes, she was definitely, she did a lot of wooing.
So, and we love you, Nicole, so much. Brilliant, beautiful brains.
Yes.
She's got everything. But yeah, so you came, but during that time, I remember we were just shell shocked, because how could the people we were in church with do this? And you would talk a lot about kind of the revealing. That's what apocalypse meant. And we're in this moment of revelation, not in the sense of dragons, but more in the sense of like, oh, you guys are Nazis.
Yeah.
Like that was my kind
possibly of dragons too. Possibly also dragons.
Yeah, and dragons. But and so anyway, 2026, we've got Project 2025 being invoked by one of the most, and I don't know if we need to cut this out, but deranged, dead-eyed people on the planet, who I cannot wait for his tribunals. I plan to be there. That's why I studied human rights and international law, so I can try that man. But anyway, getting off that part, we're looking at war with Iran, and women are losing rights. We've got concentration camps. We've got thugs with authority kidnapping people. So anyway, talk to us a bit about Revelation, end time, and of course, always rebirth.
Well, as you know, there's so much to talk about. I mean, I think so, and this is I'm thinking about this obsessively, probably more than I ever have. So I think where I'd want to start, Malika, is this sense that okay, growing up in this environment where the end of the world was always just around the corner. Last days, always, of course, the moment that we're living in is the most important moment. I think I don't think there's been a more profound shift in my life than coming to believe in, and this is the only thing that's keeping me sane these days, to the extent that I am sane, is this sense of long time, not a way of saying that I have believed for a long time, but that I believe in long time. That it is only in zooming out, not just biblically, but in terms of like world history and thinking about these very long seasons and moments. Recently, because I think they're all, in fairness, there are good reasons for anybody to be thinking about the end of the world right now. Because sometimes I feel like I've jumped from the frying pan to the fire, because it's like I went from, well, the world is God's about to burn it up. And so that's the thing you got to be afraid of. And then it's like, oh, wait a second, through catastrophic environmental change, like all these said, wait, I think we also believe in the end of the world. Like, so there are real reasons that people have for reflecting on the end. And I do think surely there are a lot of things around us that are coming to an end. But just like when we talked about death and resurrection, not that there can be an awful lot of smaller deaths, en route to resurrection. I think there's still a lot of things more broadly, more culturally, that are still in the process of dying. And the place that I keep getting pushed to, because honestly, I feel like the end of the world talk can become a kind of escape. It becomes a kind of escapism of well, one way or the other, this is all going so bad. This is all so apocalyptic and catastrophic. It's a way of saying we only have to hang on for a few more minutes. And so I keep like rooting down right now in the Hebrew Bible in these long stretches of exile. Like, because you know what would be the least popular message? You can talk about the end of the world from any direction as like a very conservative person, as very progressive people. People are, this is the end and it's never been worse, like, and all that. But you know what people really don't want to hear is that things may be really, really, really hard for a very, very long time. And that's what exile, I think, really teaches us, is that it is absolutely possible, to not go 10 years, 20 years, but to spend generations in exile. Now, this doesn't encourage me more than it does anybody else, but at least gives me a bit of a model. And so that's where, I'm trying to, maybe in my own life and with people around me, to encourage folks to back up just a little bit in terms of like, okay, maybe this is all headed towards some cataclysmic whatever, but also maybe that's not the case. And if I would have been alive during the bubonic plague, Civil War, World War II, 400 years of slavery and oppression, I mean, fill in the blanks. How many moments could you live through? The fall of the Roman Empire surely had to feel like, well, this has to be the end. Yeah. And it turned out to be an end.
Right.
But it wasn't necessarily that end. And so that's more the kind of how I'm thinking about that these days, is I don't know that it's all coming to an end, but I think an awful lot of things are coming to a kind of end. So how then that we, stay present to each other and stay present to the world while it is on fire, I think is, kind of a whole different question. But I'm trying not to give myself to the escape pod anymore of like, oh, maybe if I just hang in here for five more minutes, Jesus comes in and it'll be fine. I think there's a little more to the story than that. So.
Yeah, and that's really good, because I think that a lot. Like, there's so many Christians who are using end time theology to escape the moment and to escape responsibility and to escape right action. And I always say that, Jesus may be coming back.
Sure.
He makes, we say that, right? Christ has come, Christ has risen, Christ will come, Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again. A lot of us say that in liturgy. And so it's not that I don't believe that Christ will come back, but I want Christ to find me doing something, not
Yes.
looking up
Yes.
in the sky, right? I want him to find me busy doing, being his hands and feet in the world. And so a lot of us as Christians really do kind of try to hang up our responsibility for the ways in which we're supposed to be moving and the ways we are supposed to be speaking out and standing up, right? And that really does get me. You were just talking about exile, right? And how we can be in exile a long time. We can be in a place where we're not supposed to be, or we're out of place, or we're suffering, right, for a really, really long time. And it made me think about Jeremiah, where we love that verse, Jeremiah 29:11. Right? For the thoughts I have of you are good thoughts, right? Thoughts to prosper you and give you a future and a hope. We love that scripture. But we don't remember that Joshua is prophesying that to the people of God as they are in Babylon, right?
Yes.
And they're in Babylon for how long? Like 70 years or some crazy. And so you're right. Like, we can go through hard times for a really long time, right? But that doesn't mean that the good is not coming or that resurrection is not coming. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that point, because we want this to be over. But I think more than that, we want the good to be fully baked, fully established, fully formed, the good that we're supposed to be going to after this. So yeah, thanks.
That's so good, Cece. I love it. And it's so I, I I love it when y'all kind of share these kind of reflections, because I was just thinking a minute ago how many times I've interviewed each of you respectively, and it's so weird to not be following back questions because I want to hear your riffs on these things. But no, Cece, that's what you're saying. That's a lot of what's like holding me together right now, and I think also it's got me thinking about this tension in terms of if this is something more like exile, because I don't claim to go around being super prophetic, but I'm telling you, the times when I have in rooms said the words out loud, some version of it may get really hard for a very long time. I have felt a heat on that throw that feels like almost like otherworldly. And part of, I think, what I've realized about the whole eschatology thing, where that can be so dangerous, is that if I think a lot of us have come from faith systems where people need the end of the world, they need an apocalypse, they need a World War III, they need things to be on fire in the Middle East, they need their neighbors to suffer in order for them to get out. And the problem is, inevitably, look, if you bet on the Boston Celtics, then there is any way you can influence that game, it really has an effect in the world when you put moral stakes on needing things to burn. And I think what we have seen actually is that people who are informed by that kind of eschatology actually are in positions of unfathomable power to affect outcomes. And
That's
the fact
right.
that we have people who are in elected positions, people in all kinds of offices who believe just this kind of thing, like they're almost hoping to engineer Armageddon. And I think at this point, it's so weird to say as a person who very much still considers myself a follower of Jesus, but I can't think of anything that is destroying the world right now the way that kind of Christianity is. I mean, if the world is on the brink of extinction, that's the reason, is that a lot of people believe it has to be this way.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that when we had talked back in the table, something you had said was about how exactly that this very recent, as of the 1800s rapture kind of theology that was not around early church, is like it needs this plane ticket or this train ticket up And so the image and the movies and the Left Behind and all of this stuff that's kind of like apocalyptic, they need that to happen. So I guess what I would like to talk about and get your thoughts, because somebody who was not raised Christian, had agnostic hippies who said I could be anything, and I said I wanted to be a cheetah, and they were like, you can do it. My parents,
and they were right.
And then not quite fast enough.
Glennon Doyle would say you are a G-damn cheetah. That's what she would say. Still work, Malika.
Thank you. But came into the faith after tragedy and really just, I was like, took it all in. I was like, yes, this is what I believe. I could only do that for a few years, so I had to deconstruct it. But I really do think, now I'm looking at a lot of those scriptures differently, as in, the Christ consciousness. We have the mind of Christ, looking at like Mary Magdalene's Gospel of Mary, where she talks about Christ, within us. And like, we actually can have a different vision of heaven on earth or what's coming next, right? And like, our imagination plays a part of that. If we have the mind of Christ and then we have Christ consciousness, and like maybe that is Christ coming again, and we are looking at what does that look like to you? What does that look like also to you, Cece? Like, I feel like we play a part very much in casting that vision for people of a world that would be, in my opinion, non-hierarchical and circular, like the planet, and definitely gardening, like stewards of the earth, like in Genesis. So anyway, give us some hope. I guess that's what I'm asking. Give us some images, some thoughts. And it doesn't even have to be like constructive words. I love what you said about the praxis embodiment of the table. We get caught up in words, and God speaks to us in dreams, and it's crazy images, right? Even the book of Revelation has those images. So talk to us a bit. Like, what are we looking at when these, I believe, institutions are dying? Like, they're just under the weight of their own evil corruption. But what are we looking forward to? And maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 500 years. I don't know. But I think we can play a part of crafting a blueprint for that world.
That's for you, Jonathan Martin.
Okay, well, I did want to jump into it. So I tell you what I'm thinking about right now, Malika, is this. I don't know a bigger shift in my faith life than all of these texts, and there's so many that do talk about fire. A lot of fire in the Bible. I mean, that's not in our heads. There's a lot of fire in the Bible. And I think the biggest, we just had Brad Jerzak for our most recent Mendenhall to do a whole thing on kind of hell and judgment. What has shifted so radically for me now is that whenever I read about fire, whenever I think about fire now, and this is so much more in the water, in the Orthodox tradition in particular, what I always see is refiner's fire. There's a difference between God's fire and my fire. My fire is destructive. My rage right now just wants to burn things down. Surely God's fire is not like my fire. And coming to that kind of shift to where you can look at the world when everything is on fire and to raise the question, okay, is it even possible that instead of everything just burning down, is this actually a purifying fire? Is this a purgatorial fire? Jesus said that all will be salted with fire. Paul talks about everybody and everybody's works passing through the fire. And that for me has been such a radical shift, because now I can see things when like everything's on fire and like, okay, it's not a question of whether or not things are on fire, but what are the purposes of God in this fire? Is it possible that some institutions do need to burn, or maybe be transmuted, maybe be transfigured, maybe be transformed in the way that only fire can? So, so that's kind of my sense. And I don't know any better than anybody else what's going to come out of the fire. But my sense of what it is to, to follow Jesus is that surely I believe in a God who does transform through fire, rather than torture and torment people. And that shift for me has just been everything. Because like a lot of things are on fire, but maybe somewhere in there is a purifying love that's actually taking this somewhere.
I love that.
That's incredible. Yeah, I love that too, thinking about God's ways are higher than ours. God's thoughts are higher than ours. When we are not on the same plane. And thinking about our concept of fire being different, very different than God's, that God um has a good intention with God's fire, has a restorative God's fire has a restorative nature to it, like a healing nature to it, a rebirth to it. Like that's really, really important and powerful to think about because you're right. Like, most of the people I know really want to set things on fire and burn
Sure.
shit down right about now, right? And it is different, and it calls us to really press in as hard as we can into what we understand about the heart and nature of God, right? And I know for me right now, trying to do some bridging work with folks in MAGA and folks who are just leaving MAGA is really, really putting everything that I understand about God and I've tried to embody about Christ to the test. Right? It's calling me to be a lot more patient, a lot more gentle. And what is gentleness? Strength under control, right? It's calling me to be a lot more understanding, loving, all the things that we see Christ as, right? All the things that we know about the fruit of the Spirit. And so Lord, I just thank God that there's a fire that's different than mine. And that's a fire that I want to go further into. That's a fire.
See, so that's so beautiful. I'm so glad you said that just that way, because I've been so aware recently, and I don't want to over like paint them with the same brush, but I realize at this point, and Fillmore, where I pastor, that's a town of 500. So we're talking a very agricultural farming community, and I mean an area that's going to be a lot more red. And I realize at this point, my relationships in that community are saving my life just as much as my friendship with the imam is the other direction, because it's keeping me rooted in the kind of work that you're talking about. And because Cece, you and Malika, this is what y'all have been preaching and modeling and fighting for so long, restorative justice. And so I think sometimes for those of us who have been in that kind of justice work, we almost have to be reminded. So justice is not just restorative when we're thinking about Julius Jones and capital punishment, those kinds of things, but also the people we're really mad at that we maybe think, well, they need to, they deserve that. There's some karma. Y'all need to face up to some consequences. That justice needs to be restorative for them too. And really there's a beautiful symmetry between that. It's like God actually wants to pull everybody along. There is a vision that's spacious enough where nobody has to be left out. And that does mean that people who have been deceived, quite frankly, there has to be on-ramps for them somewhere, somehow, through relationships like the ones that you're building right now.
Yeah.
And I will say two things can be true at the same time, because I am really, with God's heart, I think her rage is also really important.
Yes.
I think the female rage, which I'm more leaning into. And I think that has been so oppressed for thousands of years, particularly because I think the Christian church did that, obviously with Constantine, because in the early church you had Mary Magdalene and other women leading, as well as along with Peter and all the guys. And I think there needs to be, at the court has to be restorative justice, but that's not always going to, I think people can think that means that we're talking about being, always gentle. And I do think like
Yeah.
there has to be this yin yang equilibrium,
Yep.
where there's also we're talking about separating some people from the community and so that they can be restored and not harm
Sure.
vulnerable people. So I think that's where we each have our place. And I think obviously, and it's so beautiful. I think we've found that Cece's working in a place that only Cece can work, because I would not be as gentle. Man, Jonathan, you're in a place where, I mean, you're working with young people, you're finding kindred spirits in different faith traditions, and you're in a community that probably thinks differently about things, but are probably also waking up to some harsh realities, and I feel
Especially if it's a rural town where there's farmers and stuff, because farmers are being hit so hard right now.
Absolutely.
harsh
Yeah, they're
realities.
feeling it. And Malika, I love what you're saying because, to me, the thing about it is like the rage that you feel and that you're talking about, that you narrate, is not killing anybody, because that's the thing.
Right.
Gentleness, it's not that everything has to be said softly all the time.
Right.
I think even that prophetic fire and rage, well, it doesn't. Torment is not the goal of any of that. So I think, there
No.
again, like, because I see the way that like that rage and fire like plays out in your life, but I do think that's an important word, that
Absolutely.
the form of tenderness prophetically doesn't always have to be gentle. It might not sound like peacemaking in the moment. Of course, sometimes there's a calling into account and things that have to be made right. So yeah, I don't think there's any tension in that at all. I think that's why it's fire. It's a fire that transforms, but it is a fire, and it's a fire that you feel, that you're right to feel.
And it should be gentle at times.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, Malika.
No,
Go ahead.
it should be gentle at times and like fierce at times. And I think that's something
Yes.
we as people of faith have not been allowed. We've been allowed to
Yes.
be certain things, and definitely dynamics change between genders. But yeah, we have to balance those times of true gentleness, like blessed are the gentle, for they will inherit the earth. And then also the fierceness of kicking over the tables. And it all plays out in different seasons, different ways, and different times. But yeah, I do think that is the fire. And it's a beautiful element at the end of the day. We're made the earth, the universe, we've got all of these really 4 elements, and fire is an important one. Cece, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, that's such a great perspective, and I think that that the gentleness and the rage creates the necessary squeeze for accountability, right? I think
I love that.
in the middle of this is the room for people to be held accountable, because the rage pushes them in on one side, and the gentleness welcomes them in on the other side. And in that squeeze, we can say, do you understand the harm? Do you understand what is happening to people's food stamps? Do you understand what is happening to people's Social Security? Do you understand what is happening here with people's Medicare? Do you understand the real harm that is being caused to real people? Real people policy is just what is happening to people, right?
Absolutely.
Do you understand what's happening to people, the policies that are damaging people? And so I love that. And I think that the gentleness that I try to lean into, and I think I'm decent at leaning into gentleness most of the time, but I think it does have to meet with something that's different from my particular gifts to create that squeeze. Absolutely.
So
That language of the squeeze and that intersection is brilliant to me. And it's one of the things that's stirring up is that I think often where rage and tenderness meet is through tears. And that maybe that's what can be missing sometimes in our expressions of prophetic anger, is I think anger and lament really have to be held together. And in some ways, it's like almost like if we don't get mad enough to cry and sob, because isn't that at the root of all of our anger is real grief at things that we see happening to people that we love, to places that we love. And so I think like making space for that kind of grief. But I love that notion that somehow maybe it's through our tears that both the rage and the tenderness kind of kind of collide. And I think that's kind of a different sound, is that rage and that fire that also makes space for lament. And this came up earlier in the conversations, really. We have so few spaces for public lament. Like, what are we going to do with all this grief that we're carrying? People don't often have room liturgically or otherwise to express that kind of pain. So I think there's surely something of grief that's in the mix alongside this anger on the one hand and tenderness and gentleness on the other. Is also just a whole lot of pain, a lot of hurt.
Yeah.
That scripture, when you said that, Jesus wept came to mind, and how in that moment he leaned into those tears, and that actually resurrected Lazarus. And I think that's been so connected. It's as though we look at Jesus doing miracles and we think, well, that was then, and he wept. Wow, that was nice of him. But Jesus said, whatever I do, you guys will do. I think if we're going to see rebirth, if we're going to see an actual heaven on earth new way, we're gonna have to lean into that pain. And that's really where the repair comes from. And that's the title of this podcast, which is Mend the World. We're not having a rebirth if we don't lean into those moments. And that comes back to kind of like that last stage of the caterpillar is the chrysalis stage. It's where they get their wings. But it's been they've been in that cocoon for a long time, dissolving into nothing but goo, until then they finally can get their wings and then break out of that cocoon and fly. And I do think without that lament and rage and gentleness and all of these ingredients that are going to really bring about a rebirth, we're not doing that through our broken and repressed stuff works. We're gonna have to, I think we're gonna have to lean into the pain. And I think that, Cece, that's what you're doing with people who are coming to terms. In fact, I have to say, the world has changed so much that I was watching a video of Tucker Carlson yesterday.
Woo-wee!
My lordy, am I agreeing with Tucker? Yes. He's talking about to Piers Morgan, which I think is so also like me watching Tucker Carlson talk to Piers Morgan was its own kind of like miracle.
Right.
But he was talking about the people. He said, listen, when it comes to what's happening in the genocides in Gaza and Israel and the United States supporting Israel's military actions in Iran and Lebanon and everywhere, he was saying there's only a small dynamic who is still on board, and that's like the boomers who are watching Fox News. His words, not mine. But he was saying everybody else is waking up and they're hurt. They're hurt because it was supposed to be no more wars, all bring peace, and all the rhetoric that had nothing to do with Project 2025. But this is the moment of pain. This is the if you double down on denial, how many times? I mean, you keep fracturing yourself. So anyway, I think, I mean, this conversation is fire. No pun intended.
And I have to say, say that you all have the benefit of hearing all of this, but this is what Malika, Jonathan, and I will be sitting around talking about if we were just at a coffee shop. We will be having a conversation. We would have, but just a few more colorful words, but we would be having the same conversation, right? And I'd have a whiskey mule. Y'all would be drinking something else. I said coffee shop. No, we would be
Cabernet Sauvignon over here.
We would be having this very same conversation. And John, we haven't been able to connect in quite a while, and so this feels like the natural conversation, like looking at each other, can you believe?
Right,
what on earth, and what are we gonna do? And so I just really I'm just glad to be back with you. I really am.
Oh, me too. No, I can't again.
Mine too. Yeah.
No, this is the best I felt for a minute. And I had this date circle on the calendar because it's I don't want to go a whole personal thing, but I do feel like a lot of things are stirring personally that are good right now. And even having this time with y'all in this particular moment in my life feels so key, and y'all have been there at so many of the key moments in my life. I think I know we are trying to land the plane. That sounds so preachy, but I think I'm thinking about too, even Malika, as you were saying all that, and we, and this idea that there are people who are waking up.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
part of what the fire looks like to me in the world of people who tend to share more of my ideas is, a lot of us have been guilty of if somebody starts on a journey, it's like we shoot them in the middle of the road before they're able to even cross the street, and
hate
a
that.
lot of ideological purity tests the other way and that kind of thing. One of the things that I think I'm seeing right now that I'm really encouraged by is I feel like there are a lot of people who are letting that down. Okay, it's actually not helpful if people don't have on-ramps
Absolutely. I
where they
agree.
can actually cross over. And it's actually not helpful to always overly police your own folks. And maybe if folks aren't, against us, they're for us. I really do think that's a kind of purifying fire that we're experiencing too.
Mm.
And I'm happy to see, some folks waking up to that. Like, yeah, actually tenderness is the only way. If there's no way that our neighbors can actually change or say that they were wrong without being told, I told you so. Why
Yeah.
didn't you listen earlier, and get like a
Mm.
lecture, so I do think that's a thing that's happening too. That's very real.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so
I agree
too.
with that. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say one thing. I do feel like when Jasmine Crockett was running and people were like, well, she did these things 5 years ago and took a free trip to Israel. And I'm like, okay, this purity, and I think that's
Right.
one of the things we talked about at the table is the purity culture. Purity culture kills
Yes.
no matter what movements, churches,
Yes.
whatever. And I it's so unhelpful. Cece, I'm sorry, I did not
Mm.
mean to interrupt you.
No, 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 no. I wasn't gonna really say anything, but that's so true. Like, and purist culture right now is really keeping us um so much more divided than what we have to be, because we
Yeah.
expect people to fit within these particular boxes. And
Mm.
if something you say, something you do, something else you believe doesn't fit squarely in the
Yeah.
box that we're comfortable with you being in, or we're
Yeah.
comfortable being in with you, then we throw everything out, like the baby with the
Mm.
bathwater kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we really gonna have to understand that every human being is layered, every human experience is complex, that just because we agree on this thing, but we don't
Yeah.
agree on that thing, doesn't mean we don't have a common goal of pushing humanity forward,
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
Absolutely.
we're really gonna have to come out of the last several years. One of the buzzwords has been non-binary. We are
Mm.
going to have to come out of this binary way of thinking, where it has to be either
Yes.
this or either that. Like, life doesn't work that way. People aren't
Absolutely.
built that way, and we're going to have to really begin to have a deeper appreciation for who we really, really are.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
acceptance of those things. Yeah.
And that's right and
Yeah.
left, and that's what's
That's
crazy.
good.
People would rather be right than actually acknowledge evolution on somebody
Mm.
changing their mind. And like being right isn't the answer, and being right isn't going to get us anywhere. At the end of the day, it's changing our minds, transforming, moving forward, dismantling, and creating something new. And yes, we need to stand against injustice, but yeah, I definitely feel this kind of the difference between a righteous anger and self-righteousness has been really,
Yes.
Mm.
It's good.
really, holding us back from actually progress,
Yeah.
and intersectionality. I mean, there are multiple genocides happening right now on the planet. We have, what's happening still in Gaza because the ceasefire,
Mm.
you know, has done nothing. We have Sudan, we have the atrocities in Congo, and we have the atrocities happening to the marginalized in the United States. And to
Mhm.
be kind of like one and nothing else, it's hindering all of us from
Mm.
transforming our very, or like you said, Jonathan, transmuting these institutions into something else. And I really did like that word, transmuting, because maybe it's not always a rebirth. Maybe it is like more of an alchemy transmuting thing that we
Mhm.
have to embrace. Everything might not disappear, but we're going to have to figure out how to transform some things that exist right now. I think that's one of the things that we don't hear about. Obviously
Sure.
what you guys are doing are you're doing good, and that doesn't get news cycles. We don't see that often on social media. We don't get to hear about the day-to-day, the beauty of people. I just want to say something. Thursday, I was in a coffee shop in a hospital in Italy. We're all fine. Just put that out there. But I had a nice conversation with the cashier, grabbed my cup of coffee, turned and fell over I don't know, concession stand. They were selling something there, and like not one of those where you're falling for a while and you think you know what you're going to do. It was like a face plant.
Oh,
And
no.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in Italy, and all of a sudden I feel one person on this side, one person on this side, and they lift me to my feet, and then just a barrage, "Bam, Benny, ba Benny, ba Benny," I'm like, I'm okay. I slipped up, spoke English, and then it's like everyone switched to English. "Are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? Can we get you anything?" People handing me drinks. The cashier came around, who I didn't speak English to, "Are you sure you're okay? We can get you something." I'm like, "I'm fine." But it just reminded me that people are good. You know what I mean?
People are
Like
good.
the
Yeah.
impulse of almost everyone I've met everywhere in the world that I've been to is like
Yeah.
kind, good people. And you've got this small percentage of people doing some horrifically
Mhm.
evil things, ensuring that systems oppress large groups of people,
That's
and
right.
weapon manufacturers continue to make money off misery. But like in general, I
Yeah.
think human beings are good and good-hearted wherever you go. And it's like, yeah, we don't hear about that. We don't hear about the fact that there's so many wonderful, good people doing wonderful, good things. So that gives me
That's
hope
right.
anyway, having
That's
fallen flat
good.
on my face. So
Mm.
what's giving you guys hope?
Mm. What do you
Okay,
think, Cece?
Jonathan, let me go first because I want you
Please.
to. I know we need to wrap this up soon, and I want you to go. You need to tell us how to mend the world. That's the name of this
Yes.
podcast. Okay, so think about it a second, and we expect an
I'll
answer.
pick that up, yeah.
Okay, we expect an answer. What is giving me hope right now? You know, what's giving me hope? The number of people who in the last maybe 1 or 2 years that I've seen come together to huddle, to organize, to resist, to plan, to strategize, people from all kinds of industries and backgrounds to say, no, no, democracy is important to us.
Mm.
And being good to people is important to us. And so then how do we come together to fight for what we believe is right? That is really, really life-giving to me and hopeful to me, because you have people who the world might not ever know by name, right? But have decided to huddle together because they believe that their power is strong.
Yeah.
And they believe that their power is stronger than an executive branch, than a judicial branch. They believe that their power is stronger than the powers that we see. That's so hopeful to me. And those are the kind of environments I need to be in, want to be in. I'm in every minute that I can be in, because I just think, I always say, people are stronger than systems. And I'm seeing
Yes.
people who believe that come together all the time.
Mm.
Jonathan, what is the answer? How do we mend the world?
Well, I love that, Cece. Thinking of a new U2 lyric, the power of the people is so much greater than the people in power.
Lord have
I
mercy.
think there's something electric about that. I mean, in terms of what gives me hope, it has to be a version of the same answer, because whether it's with our Buddhist, Hindu students on campus, or Jewish students, Muslim students, students that have no faith tradition at all, the things I see happening with them in community on one hand, but then again in our little rural Methodist church out in the country, there's so many small green hopeful things that are coming up out of the ground. When I talk about why I'm a Christian in terms of believing in death and resurrection, that's what it is. I mean, like in Greencastle a couple weeks ago, we had this freak snow, and it was like literally the morning after it started to clear after 10 days that I see these tiny little flowers coming up for the first time. And it's like, this is really how it works. It's like death, 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 death. And out of a sudden, wait, is this magic? How is it possible that there is this? And clearly this has been happening under the surface and I didn't see it. Those kind of things are happening to me all the time, where I see something small and green and hopeful that to me speaks of, of the Holy Spirit at work. So yeah, like I see a lot of resurrection. And Malika, to what you said, I think it's so important. At the end of the day, I have a fun quiz that I give all of our students. It's this fundamental kind of spirituality quiz just to get them talking. And one of there are a lot of really intentionally stark questions. And one of them is, do you believe people at their core are A, fundamentally good, or B, fundamentally evil? Pretty massive ramifications based on how you answer that question. At this point in my life, despite what can feel like a lot of evidence to the contrary, I really do believe that people are fundamentally good, and I see it all the time. Even people who aren't yet really connecting some of these dots with systems and structures in individual cases who do the right thing and the kind thing and the tender thing when the opportunity presents itself. So, I have to hang on to those things. I have to hang on to things that are green and hopeful that I see happening with our kids. And the way that I'm not going to hold a thing, but the way I'm inspired through films and when I'm walking my dog, every little moment of beauty and goodness, we get to claim those things and hang on to them. And I'm trying to. Stella, she's here. She's just over. She's watching us.
Stella doing? We haven't seen Stella in so long. She's
doing great. She's doing great. You know what? She's the Holy Ghost in dog form in my life. So it always reminds me of just like the goodness of God in that way. But yeah, I mean, good. Our kids are amazing, and the way that they're changing and growing, and the things that they say, it's like I see so much goodness in the world, despite all the other. And I think most people, and this is, by the way, why I get sincerely worried about people, when you get like hyper online and that's all it is, you can really get cut off from the actual good and beauty of what's happening in real communities on the ground. Everybody needs this kind of like face-to-face, hear somebody's story, where we get to bear witness to a reality that's beyond our own. If we're just kind of in our silos, reinforcing our own kind of news feed all the time, goodness, what a recipe for despair and depression. So just being able to do this kind of face-to-face thing is just, that's everything to me right now.
I want folks to know, Malika, we're getting ready to, I think, wrap it up. Did you want to say a closing word?
I wanted to say thank you to my big brother, Jonathan Martin, who is family. Cece, of course, is my sister and work spouse.
We're work spouses, people.
And much love to Nicole and all the kiddos. But I just want to say thank you for, you are a godsend and a divine connection, which is super Christianese. How about you are like sent from the divine in a time when I desperately I needed you, and I still do, but I want everyone to know that Jonathan's book and several books, but How to Survive a Shipwreck, I believe you can get on Amazon, because it really I probably will reread it. It really got me through that piece of wood I needed, and I think it's more relevant now, is relevant, or if not more. And also just, finding Jonathan wherever he speaks, asking Jonathan to come to your conferences. Like Jonathan Martin is a bit of heaven on earth. You are a thin place. You are somebody who carries the spirit, and I mean that transcends Christianity, like just a piece of heaven, piece of the divine on earth. You carry that love, and you carry that goodness and that passion and that fire and that gentleness, and incredibly funny, and can hold his whiskey. Knows a lot about whiskey.
Yes, I can. Jonathan, tell folks where they can find you.
Yes, please.
So thank you. Well, that got me teary, Malika. Just I think, and I'm not just, so JonathanMartinWords.com,
JonathanMartinWords.com.
Jonathan A. Martin on Instagram. Again, I am getting back out there. One of the things actually that's felt really confirmed even the last few minutes, and the whole plan is not fully cooked, and so this would be the first I'd be announcing this anywhere. But long story short, I feel very strongly that there is a version of the table that needs to happen in Greencastle. So I'm kind of in the process of discerning that. But it was so interesting how being with y'all today just kind of brings that full circle in terms of, we didn't know, none of us knew what we were doing, of course, but feeling like this is absolutely a broader spirit thing that's happening. And the way you even joke about being work spouses, the beautiful things the two of you are doing together, I just can't say enough about how much y'all inspire me to want to keep going and to stay in the fight. And, because really, I mean, I don't want to sound like cheesy, but when even asking the question, like, what brings me hope right now? It's like, well, y'all bring me hope. You were bringing me hope actively, like in this moment. And in the moments when I don't get to see you, I'm feeling that too. So I'm just so grateful for the hope that both of you bring and that you embody, and the fight that you bring.
Yeah.
That we desperately need.
Yeah.
Well, today I'm feeling like more and more that relationships will mend the world. And Jonathan, again, thank you to everybody out there that that's listening to our brand new podcast, Mend the World.
Yes.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for joining us. Yeah, and stay with us, like wherever you can, hit the like button or something, like subscribe. I'm sure it's somewhere around here.
Absolutely.
So thank y'all for joining us, and we
Yes.
will be back with you soon. And until next time, y'all figure out ways to mend this world, all right? Thanks so much.
Love you.